I've got a lot of mixed emotions going through my head right now. The playoff bubble battle at Indianapolis today definitely lived up to the hype. We've got a lot to talk about. The regular season is officially over. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I really don't know where to start with this video. We're going to talk about the top finishers, we're going to talk about the winner, we're going to talk about the major moments of today's race that really shaped the playoff bubble, that we saw, the battle that we saw there all throughout the day. And then I'm going to put this race on the Groovy gauge at the very end, but I want to spend most of this episode talking about what we saw regarding playoff bubble drivers, contenders, and just kind of reacting to all of that together. That's really the takeaway of today's race, and that's what I want to spend the most amount of time talking about. So let's start. Just jump right into it. Let's talk about the winner, Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick won the Brickyard 400 for the first time since 2003, so it's been a while since Harvick got to kiss those bricks. Harvick dominated today's race. He started from the pole. There was only one point in this race where he lost the lead. It was when he surprisingly chose the inside lane on a restart and let Ryan Blaney take advantage of him. But with that one exception, Harvick led, I think, 118 out of 160 laps today. He was the class of the field. There were very few cars that could really hang with him for any significant length of time. Restarts fell his way. Cautions fell his way. He executed and got some very important playoff points here with the playoffs literally right around the corner. He needed all those bonus points to try and keep up with Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., and some of the Toyotas that have several wins this year. Harvick needed these playoff points and really got them in a big way because he also won some stages there. As much as I could talk about Kevin Harvick here, the story really wasn't about that 4-car. Great performance, great day, great win, but the focus was really on a lot of these drivers finishing below him. We'll start there. Second place, Joey Logano. Strong performance. Good to see Penske maybe turn the corner a little bit. They've struggled this summer as an entire team. The Joe Gibbs Toyotas have really separated themselves from the Penske Fords, but Ryan Blaney ran well. Brad Keselowski was in the top 5 when he was caught up in a wreck earlier in this thing. And then Joey Logano here obviously finishing second. Good day for Team Penske. We've got to talk, though, about that third place finisher, Bubba Wallace. No playoff implications here. If he'd won the race, there had been huge playoff implications. And at one point, I thought it was possible. Logano and Harvick were kind of slowing each other down on one of those last restarts. I thought Bubba might sneak by. Couldn't quite do it. But Bubba Wallace, with easily his best performance, I would say this is the most impressive performance I've seen from him in his entire career. Bristol last year, where he actually drove up and led some laps, was impressive, but he ultimately faded in that race and didn't even get a top 10. He was able to consistently run up in that top 15 pretty much this entire race and was up there in the top 5 when it mattered most. This was probably the most impressive performance in Bubba Wallace's young career and the most impressive performance I've seen from Richard Petty Motorsports since Almirola left. Huge credit to the 43 team for making a big stride. That's why I'm wearing the Dynaco t-shirt from the movie Cars. The 43 was sponsored by Dynaco. This is supposed to be Petty Blue, but the lighting in here doesn't really work too well. Anyway, William Byron, a strong 4th place finish, best finishing Hendrick car in today's race. And then there's Clint Bowyer, the first driver that was on that playoff bubble. Now, Clint Bowyer came into this race with an 8-point cushion, so we knew if he just consistently ran top 10 out of day, stayed out of trouble, we figured Clint Bowyer would probably be safe. And that's exactly what he did. He never had anything to contend with Harvick or Logano or the leaders. He really never did. But he was consistently right there in the top 10, top 5. Had to dodge some wrecks. At one point, Bowman went spinning right in front of him. He had to make a pretty quick judgment decision to miss that wreck. So it was not an easy, relaxing day for Clint Bowyer, but a solid performance nonetheless. So he advances into the NASCAR playoffs, second time now in 3 years, 2 straight seasons. He has made the playoffs, and that's got to feel good, especially given that he's still kind of in contract limbo going into next season. Denny Hamlin was the highest finishing Toyota. That's surprising. A lot of the Joe Gibbs cars had issues. Eric Jones was involved in a wreck with Brad Keselowski. It looked like Keselowski didn't give Jones a lot of room, took the air off his car. Jones got loose, spun out. That was a huge wreck. Raised awareness of the lack of a safer barrier on the inside wall here at Indianapolis. Brad Keselowski ended up on the tire barrier, which very scary hit, very big moment for both drivers. Glad everyone walked away, or in Brad Keselowski's case, kind of crawled away because his car was on his side. He was okay. Everyone was safe. But it was a big, crazy wreck. So that was one instance of a Gibbs car having issues. Hamlin even had some contact on pit road. So did Martin Truex. That's why he was never a factor in this race. And then Kyle Busch blew an engine. Can you believe that? We don't really see blown engines these days, especially with only 550 horsepower being turned. You don't see a whole lot of blown engines, but Kyle Busch did have a blown engine this race. So Hamlin was the highest finishing Toyota. Remember, Joe Gibbs coming into this race was trying to be the first team ever to sweep all 4 crown jewel races in a season, and they came up just a few positions short. Blaney finished 7th. I mentioned Penske having a good day a moment ago. Now we got to talk about Ryan Newman finishing 8th, another playoff bubble driver. He came into this race tied with Daniel Suarez for the last spot. As you see a little further down, Suarez finished just a few positions lower. So let's talk a little bit about what led to these two drivers being in those situations at the end of this thing. Ryan Newman ran a flawless race, pretty much, in my opinion. You know, that 6 car a year and a half ago, it was not a top 10 car. I don't think it was capable of running top 10 at any track on the circuit except maybe Daytona and Talladega. And even then, I don't think it could really do it then. Newman this year is still not finished outside the top 25 in a single race, and he had a top 10 car basically from the get-go, consistently right there in the 8th to 15th range. Basically, I'm gonna start calling that the Newman range. You know, you're not really contending for the win, but that 8th to 16th range, that's the Newman range. I'm calling it that now, from now on. Daniel Suarez had a very up and down day. Early on in this thing, he actually made a mistake and hit the wall. Didn't hit it very hard, but made a bad mistake early on in this very important race. Now, he was able to rebound from that and was able to run back up into the top 5 late in this thing. He even collected some stage points at the end of stage 2, but ultimately when it came down to it, a poorly timed caution is what did Daniel Suarez in. Because, spoiler alert, Ryan Newman is making the playoffs this year for Roush Fenway Racing in that 6 car. Huge for that team. Huge for Ryan Newman as well. You know, Ryan Newman's a veteran driver who's kind of found some new life at Roush of all places. But more importantly, Roush Fenway Racing, a team that was nowhere a year and a half ago, is now in the playoffs. And it's not with Ricky Stenhouse, no, it's with that 6 car. That 6 car hasn't been consistently competitive since freaking Mark Martin over a decade and a half ago. But that 6 car is back in the playoffs, and it's mainly due to Ryan Newman and new crew chief Scott Graves. Remember, he came over there from Joe Gibbs Racing. I'll give Scott Graves some credit here as well. I think he deserves it. But Daniel Suarez was in position, looked like he had the track position, but then he pit early on in the final green flag cycle, and an untimely caution with Larson spinning out, as he sometimes does, really ruined Suarez's playoff hopes. Because on that final run of the race, he was catching Newman, but it was just so hard to pass at Indianapolis. It's a one-groove track, really. He really ran out of time. If the race had been 10 or 15 laps longer, maybe Suarez would have had a shot to catch Newman and make it a battle, but with the track position he lost, being trapped a lap down like that, Suarez never really had a chance to get back up there and race with Newman. So credit to Ryan Newman, did everything he had to do. Suarez, a little bit of it was self-inflicted, but another little bit was just bad luck. So you hate to see it. Suarez now 0 for 3 in his young career trying to make the playoffs. 3 years with 2 really, really good teams, and no playoff efforts to show for it. At some point, I think the question needs to be asked if Daniel Suarez is a legitimate Cup Series driver. I'm giving up on him. I'm personally starting to give up on him. I think it's clear that he is not where a lot of the other young guns are. He's not on Alex Bowman's level. He's not on Eric Jones or Chase Elliott or Kyle Larson or Ryan Blaney's level. He's maybe at William Byron's level, but Byron is like 7 years younger, so is that really a good thing for Suarez to only be at William Byron's level? I don't think so. Daniel Suarez, I know he brings in funding from Eris because he has connections to that company. I know he's probably going to still be in that 41 car next year, but I can't say he deserves it at this point. That's just the truth. I like Daniel Suarez as a personality, but he makes too many mistakes. Even in this race, he dumped Matt Tifft late in this thing, just making an over-aggressive move, just a bad move. Suarez costing other people equipment. You know, it's just, I am a little tired now of the Daniel Suarez experiment. I'm a fan of Suarez as far as his personality goes, as far as his grit, as far as his toughness goes. But as far as driver, he's not Cup Series ready, especially not top-tier equipment Cup Series ready. So I'm going to leave it at that. Don't want to tear into Daniel Suarez too bad, but I think the experiment, it's officially a failure at this point. He can turn it around. He can turn it around. It's not impossible. You know, Logano seemed like a possible failure until he left Joe Gibbs Racing. It's not completely over for Daniel Suarez, but I'm officially off whatever bandwagon might have existed. Anyway, didn't mean to talk about Daniel Suarez all that much. You can see the rest of the top 20 finishers there. I don't want to dwell on any of them too much just because I have so much to say about our other playoff bubble contender. We have to talk about Jimmie Johnson. You won't see him on that list because he finished this race in the 35th position. Now, Jimmie Johnson coming into this race today was 18 points back. We knew he was almost in a must-win scenario, and that's basically what we saw, and that's, I think, how Jimmie Johnson raced today. And now credit to that 48 team. They rolled into qualifying this morning and qualified in the top 5. That's great. Great start to the day. And as the race progressed, they were consistently still there in the top 10. They did not have the speed Harvick or Logano or even Kyle Larson had, so they weren't really contenders to win this race, but they were top 5 contenders. And, given, we saw Suarez have some issues, if Newman or Boyer had some issues, Jimmie Johnson would have definitely been in contention to make the playoffs. But ultimately, things did not go his way. With about 40 laps to go on a restart, Jimmie Johnson got loose underneath his teammate William Byron, spun out, hit the wall, ended his day, destroyed his race car, and ends, in my opinion, one of the most dominating runs, one of the most dominating eras in professional sports history. Ever since the playoffs / chase were invented in 2004, Jimmie Johnson has made every single one. He has qualified every single year. The only driver to have done that. The only driver who's made the chase / playoffs every single year since it's been implemented until now. That 15-year streak comes to an end. Now, Jimmie Johnson, during those 15 years, won 7 championships, 80 races or so. Actually, I guess from 2004 on, I don't know how many races he won specifically. It was around 80, I guess. Easily the most accomplished NASCAR driver of the last 2 decades. Arguably the greatest driver of all time. That's a serious argument that I think people can make and people can have now. But his era is officially over. He is past his prime. I know it's kind of been obvious for about 1.5 to 2 years now, but I think we can officially say it now. The stats officially are there. It's over. It's over for the Jimmie Johnson era. He could still come back next year and make the playoffs. I think there's a very good chance he will, as a matter of fact. But the Jimmie Johnson era has passed. And it was fun while it lasted, I guess. It was something. It was a spectacle to behold. 5 straight championships, 7 total. We didn't think anyone would match Dale Sr. or Richard Petty, but here comes Jimmie Johnson out of nowhere to do it. That era had a lot of things to be excited about, a lot of things that built NASCAR as a sport into the nationwide, worldwide phenomenon that it is today. But at the era, it's officially over, and it's bittersweet. I know I picked Jimmie Johnson at the beginning of the year to miss the playoffs, and I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for that prediction. Got that one right. But I'll be honest, coming in today, I really hoped he would run well. I really hoped that he would at least be in contention for the win late in this race, like he was in 2017 when he battled with Casey Kane and almost won that race that year at Indianapolis. I was hoping we'd have a similar situation like that today, and ultimately he put himself up in a pretty good position. And his teammate William Byron maybe could have given him a little bit more space there. They were 3 wide, so I understand. I'm not going to put too much blame here on William Byron, but I'm sure Jimmie expected a little more space from a teammate. But it is what it is. Very fiery way for this era, for this season to end. But I hope all Jimmie Johnson fans, I mean, unless you're a really young Jimmie Johnson fan, if you only became a Jimmie fan the last year or 2, I do feel sorry for you. But if you've been a Jimmie Johnson fan at any significant point of this era, if you've been around for 5, 10, 15 years, been watching him since the beginning, just remember, you've had arguably the best run you can possibly have in professional sports with your guy. So I do feel bad for a lot of Jimmie Johnson fans, especially newer ones, but man, he had a glorious decade and a half, while it lasted. So remember the good times. Don't harp on the bad seasons like this year. That's all I really wanted to say about Jimmie Johnson. I still have a tremendous amount of respect for him as a driver, his career, obviously. But yeah, it's all over. So to clarify, Clint Boyer and Ryan Newman advance. They're in the playoffs. Daniel Suarez and Jimmie Johnson are out. Man, crazy. So now we've talked about the playoffs, and definitely in the next week or so, we will have a couple more episodes that are previewing the entire playoffs. Las Vegas is next weekend. Going to be a great way to start the postseason. So I'll have plenty more videos in the next few days to talk more about the playoffs and everything. But to end this video, this long review episode, I want to talk about the Indianapolis race, the racing itself, the race we saw today, the event as a whole, because Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I talked about it earlier this week, is probably the most polarizing racetrack on the NASCAR schedule right now. So many NASCAR fans hate it because, they feel like NASCAR is just trying to piggyback off of IndyCar's success because the racing in Indy hasn't always been the best. It's kind of a one-groove track where the cars really can't race. It's very aero-dependent. It's like a baby Daytona, but without the cool packs. But there are some people that still love NASCAR going to Indianapolis because it is the Brickyard, the most famous track in the world, and it does present some really cool moments. Like we saw today, you could tell Kevin Harvick was really excited to win the Brickyard 400. It is a crown jewel race of the sport because of the history at this racetrack, because of the huge names and the huge events that have taken place here. Now, it's fair to say NASCAR at Indianapolis, as far as the spectacle is concerned, has diminished quite a bit. NASCAR used to fill over 200,000 seats in this race a decade ago. Nowadays, reports said they had 65,000 there today, which I can believe it. This place seats almost like 250,000 people, so there were a lot of gaps in the stands, but I did see a few sections that were pretty full, so I can believe we had 50,000, 60,000 people there. But that being said, it's clear that this event has dropped off quite a bit. It is no longer a must-see event like it was a decade ago. But focusing on the racing itself, this race, I'm not going to say the racing was good because it was a one-groove track. This new aero package didn't fit this track particularly well. I don't think it made the racing much worse than it was last year or the year before. I think the racing was still very similar. We saw some great side-by-side on restarts. Drafting came into play. You guys could get loose and use the air to disrupt other people's cars, which I do like a little bit of that. So the racing wasn't bad, but it wasn't amazing. I don't like that this is a fast track that's only one groove. I'm not a big fan of any of the fast, flat tracks. Pocono, the first time we went there this year, was terrible. This was a little bit better than that, I'd say. But Pocono, the second time we went there, where we added the grip strip in turn 3 and made it a multi-groove track, Pocono 2 was outstanding, at least by Pocono standards. So today's race at Indianapolis, as far as the racing is concerned, was mediocre, I would say. However, we had some pretty intense moments. I mean, Landon Castle lost a tire, huge wreck, glad he was okay. Obviously the wreck with Eric Jones and Brad Keselowski was another just kind of, whoa, you don't see that every day. Kyle Busch blowing an engine, people scrambling, debates about cautions, Jimmie Johnson's crashed, guys just overdriving it like Suarez did at the end there to get into Matt Tifft. It was still an entertaining race in the sense that you knew that something crazy could happen at any moment, and restarts were wild, playoff implications were everywhere you looked. So as far as the entertainment factor of today's race, I was entertained for the full 4 hours or so I watched. But it wasn't because the racing product itself was outstanding. I would just say it was entertaining because there was drama, there was unpredictability about it, there was craziness on pit road and everything, there was tire strategy, pit strategy. This race did have a lot of stuff, just not great green flag racing. 3 laps after a restart, the racing was kind of meh. So if I put this thing on my Groovy Gauge, which I forgot to introduce, hi Groovy Gauge, hello, welcome, follow me into my new studio, I love it. It's like attached to me. We have like a invisible bond. If I had to put this thing on my Groovy Gauge, I'm gonna give this race a solid 70%. And some of you guys might disagree with me, but as far as the entertainment value is concerned, 70% for me. It was an enjoyable race. Now maybe it was only heightened because of the fact this was the last race of the regular season and the points battle was very prevalent and very noticeable and people were noticeably more aggressive. Maybe that's all it was, but I don't know, it was enough for me. Isn't a race supposed to be entertaining? If it's on national TV, it should be entertaining, right? And I thought today's race was pretty entertaining. So I'm gonna give it a 70%. Probably higher than most people would have expected coming into an Indianapolis race weekend, but that's just my opinion. I want to know you guys' opinion down below. Let me know what you thought of today's race. Look forward to reading all of your responses. I feel like I'm forgetting something else notable about this race. I probably am, but there's just so much to talk about. I wanted to focus on the point standings and the playoff bubble drivers and their crazy days today. That's what I wanted to focus on, but I'll have more videos up later this week to talk about even more stuff. So thank you all so much for watching. Remember, you can follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, continue the conversation over there, and of course a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. As always, it's Michael Harrison at Jews of the Stars, Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason R. Long, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Denison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Lucius, Jeremy Conkling, Emilio Garcia, Joey DiMacchino, Sky Racing Forum, Bryce Schumacher, Bryce Starcher, Scott McNew, and the rest of these incredible Patreon supporters right here. We continue to add new names pretty much every single week. You guys are amazing. You support directly what I'm doing here, what the show is, and I couldn't thank you enough. Thank you guys for the amazing support. Like I said, more videos up later this week. Still working on the studio, trying to get it a little bit more developed, but I will see you guys again very, very soon. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed the race today, and I'll see you guys again in just a couple days. Goodbye, everyone.